Hey, my relatives. Hello, it's Mark Charles. Today is Friday, June 6th, and I'm sitting here with my second cup of coffee. It's iced coffee because afternoon, especially as late as it is today, it's almost 2 o'clock. Actually, it's after 2 o'clock. I like to drink iced coffee instead of hot coffee. So it's a second cup of iced coffee, and I'm grateful that I can sit down and talk with you. For those of you who've been following me on social media, you know I've been trying a few new things this week. I'm doing what I'm calling my first cup of coffee, and I'm not streaming it, but I'm posting it a few times a week. I think I've done 3 this past week, and I started my first cup of coffee earlier this week because I wanted a way to kind of engage with you more frequently, but also not have a platform that's solely devoted or primarily devoted to the political debate and some of the religious debate, but just a place where I can share some more, not just positive, but uh, helpful thoughts and interactions and things like that. And so I'm trying to share a few positive, intriguing, interesting thoughts that I have each day. They're fairly short, about maybe 3 or 4 minutes long. And just trying to share with you some of the stuff I'm reading, some of the stuff as I walk through nature or see different things around DC. And I'm hoping it will continue to help grow my platform a little bit. But yeah, I've been excited to share some of those. I've done 3 of those this week. I'm posting them to my Patreon site as well as to my um, Instagram account and to my YouTube channel. And I think I might be cross sharing them to one of my Facebook accounts, but I'm not positive. Anyway, you can find those. They're called My First Cup of Coffee. I usually share them between 9 and 10 in the morning, and they're not live streamed. They're recorded and on my phone and posted from my phone. So they're not real slick, but they gets the job done. Anyway, my relatives, I'm glad you can join me. And I want to start today, like I always do, by acknowledge I'm speaking to you from Piscataway lands. It's now called Washington, D.C. But the Piscataway, they were the nation that they were living here. They were hunting here, farming here, and fishing here long before Columbus got lost at sea. And they're still here. So I want to continue to acknowledge and honor the Piscataway people as the hosts of the land where I'm living. I want to thank them for their stewardship of these lands and just remind myself how humbling it is to be living, breathing, moving, walking, existing on these lands today. So, my Piscataway relatives, thank you for your stewardship of these lands. So if you're following the news, right, you'll know Trump and uh, uh, Elon Musk's bromance is over. They are screaming at each other. I think if they were in the same room, they'd be poking each other eyeballs and maybe who knows what they would be doing. But yeah, they're acting very childish, and I don't know what they're doing. Billionaires, they tire me. Anyway, I'm not going to comment much on that today, other than to say it looks absurd. And I wish both of them had been parented better than they were. But I'm not going to go into that right now. But I just find it very shameful, I guess, for our nation, for our globe, for our world, that these two grown men are behaving as childish as they are. It's unfortunate. Um, and like I said, I wish that they had learned to behave as better humans in this global community that they are unfortunately leaders in. So, yeah, Elon, Donald, grow up and please set a better example for the world. Um, for the discussion I want to have today, if you remember back in February, I talked about some books I was reading, and I was going through some books regarding a third book that I'm researching and putting some thoughts into. I haven't started writing it yet, but I am talking about it and speaking about it. I'm calling it Decolonizing Health. And I'm really using this book. If you followed my journey here on social media, you'll know that over the past 2 years, I've radically changed my health. I have lost around 55, almost 60 pounds. I have changed most of my health measures, improved them for the better. My blood glucose level is lower. My um, uh, all of my metabolic measurements are better. My sleep has increased. My breathing has improved. I eat much healthier, much less processed foods, many more whole foods. I'm moving and exercising on a regular basis, running several times a week, as well as walking, usually between 14 and 16, almost 20,000 steps a day. And it's drastically changed my health and improved not only my physical health, but also my emotional, mental, and even my spiritual health. And it's been a fascinating journey. And I've also read many, 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 many books over the past 2 years as I've tried to find the best ways to improve my health. And if you've ever read a health book or more than one, you know that most authors have their one thing, right? The one thing: eat this, don't eat that, do this, don't do that, do this one thing. And if you do this one thing and don't do these other things, you will be prosperous, you will be beautiful, and you'll live to be well over 100. They almost all overpromise, and none of them are fully correct, but neither are all of them completely wrong. And so as I was reading through these books, as I was trying to understand what do I need to do to become healthier, to be healthier, I realized I needed a filter. And the more and more I got into the journey, the more I realized the filter I was using to apply to these books, many of them written from a scientific basis or scientific perspective, was I was applying Indigenous wisdom to them. And I found that if I used Indigenous wisdom and compared what they were talking about in the books to how my people or other Indigenous people lived prior to colonization, what our ancestors and people taught us, then that was usually a good measure of was what they're talking about in their books, the books I was reading, going to be helpful or not helpful. And so that's one of the reasons I'm calling this book, the one I'm researching and writing, Decolonizing Health, because I realize so many of our health measures and our health have been, because of our colonial life patterns and lifestyles and culture and attitudes, it has really destroyed our health. And if we want to be healthier, it's not just about waiting for agribusiness to improve, our new policies from the government. It's about we need to actually take some proactive and intentional steps to live differently, to eat differently, and to do something about our health context, our food context, our movement context, and take better control of our health. So anyway, that's what I'm doing with this book. That's what I'm thinking about, and that's what I'm talking about. And I need to let you know up front, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a scientist. I am not telling you what you do and do not need to do. I'm sharing with you some of the stuff I've learned, some of the stuff I've thought about, and some of the things that I've been trying. And I'm offering a perspective on what I found has been working. But I encourage you to make the decisions that are best for you. And if you feel the need, by all means, discuss what I'm sharing with you with your healthcare professional or your family members before you make any drastic changes to what you're trying to do. But I merely want to let you know some of the stuff I've been working on, what I've been doing, how I've been processing through all this information as I've been working to improve my health. So anyway, let me see who's on with me. I know there's a few people who are joining. Let me see who's jumped on. No one's in the chat. No one's on the chat, but there's several people watching. So Yate, thanks for joining me. All of you who are on here, please grab a cup of your favorite early afternoon, mid-afternoon beverage, and I'm looking forward to the conversation we're going to have. So I did part one of this topic back in February of 2025. And I was going to go through 3 books. The first book that I was going through was In Defense of Food by Michael Pollan. And I talked about that in the podcast that I did back in February. I also spoke about Johan Hari's book, Magic Pill. In Defense of Food talks about our need to eat more whole foods, more real foods, mostly fruits and vegetables, and to really focus on eating healthy, real food diet, eating less processed foods. The Magic Pill was about kind of a fairly honest look on some of the drugs that are being used today to curb appetite and to fight obesity in our country. And Johan Hari, who's a good author, took a fairly good honest look at some of these pills and some of these drugs and gave some really good thoughts on them. And so I'm not going to go back and revisit all of those because I did talk about those when I did the first part of this session back in February. I will post the link to that into my chat. And so if you want to follow there, you're more than welcome to. You can go back and watch that. That's on my YouTube channel. It's also on my podcast, which is you can download wherever you find your podcasts. It's the episode from February. I forget which week, but Decolonizing Health was the title of it. But I finished that section beginning a discussion on a book that I'm really excited about, and I want to share some about that book with you today. It's called The End of Craving by Mark Schatzker. And this book has been a really, really fascinating read for me. In fact, I just read it a second time last week so I could get it fresh in my head again before I had this conversation with you. And if you go back and watch the session I did back in February, I started talking about how, and I'll even go a little further into that. So in this book, The End of Craving, Mark goes into a discussion and he starts out talking about the entire debate. Steve, hey, thanks for joining. Glad you're here. Glad you could join today. It's good to have you. So yeah, in The End of Craving, Mark begins the book, towards the beginning of the book, addressing the whole low fat, low carb debate. And he talks about bringing advocates and people on both sides of those debate into a room. They got together. He didn't do it, but they got together and they decided to do a health test that was going to once and for all prove, was it going to be low fat or low carb? That was going to be what was healthiest for us as people. And they did a test and it didn't really demonstrate anything. And so they did another test that was much more extensive. And he said the thing it showed is both diets, low carb and low fat, worked for a while and then didn't work for a while. For some people, a few people, it got great results. For other people, it did not get many results. And he said, but one of the things that really struck the people who were doing the test was how similar the two diets performed, and looking nearly identical in many of the measurements as far as weight loss and regaining weight and how many people it worked for, how many people it didn't work for, and so on and so forth. And he then goes into the whole discussion. He approaches the whole debate on health and especially on weight loss and weight gain from another perspective. And he looks at it from the perspective of not just processed foods, but enriched and fortified foods. And back in February, I spoke about a test that he references in the book where, or not a test, just some history where back in the early 1900s, there was an epidemic of filagra, both here in the United States and in Italy. Filagra is a lack of niacin in the body. And niacin is one of the micronutrients that helps us turn our fructose and sucrose into glucose, which is what our body burns for a lot of its fuel. And for people who eat a corn-based diet, they tend to have less, they are more in danger of getting filagra. And it's a very painful and even deadly disease. And back in the early 1900s, tens of thousands of people, around 10,000 people, were dying annually from this disease. in the US, and also there was a similar epidemic in Italy, especially in farming and more rural communities. And it usually would hit in the spring after people were not eating many fruits and vegetables or eating a lot of meat. And so anyway, so he looked at how the two countries addressed that problem as they learned more and more about micronutrients and actually discovered it was a lack of niacin that was causing pellagra. And Italy solved their problem, and he reports in the book, by changing the way the people ate. They encouraged people to bake bread communally. They encouraged people to drink more wine, especially the cheap wine the communities were drinking were made with yeast that had niacin in it. And they encouraged people to raise rabbits, which was a cheap form of meat, which also had niacin in it. And over the course of 5 to 10 years, they pretty much wiped out the pellagra epidemic. And after about 5 or 10 years, very few, if any, people were dying from pellagra in that country. The US fixed it literally almost overnight. Almost within a year, we dropped our pellagra cases by, I think, over 90%. And we did it by enriching our food. We added we added niacin into our white rice, our white pastas, and our white flour. And again, that cured our pellagra cases literally almost overnight. Now, the interesting thing was about 10,000 people a year were dying from pellagra, which is a significant number. But the US government changed the food environment for everybody. So we had hundreds of millions of people who weren't getting pellagra, who weren't having a lack of niacin, and they enriched the flour for everybody. And what it did, and he talks about some of the mentality that did, whereas in Italy, they changed the way people prepared their food and the way they ate and even what they ate and how they ate. They corrected some of their dietary challenges. But in the US, we changed what everybody ate by changing our food, enriching white rice, white flour, and white pasta, and we did it for everybody. And today, right, 50, 60, 70 years later, the US has an obesity rate of over 40%, and Italy has an obesity rate of less than 14%. I looked up just the other day, it's around 12%. And so then he mentions that early in the book, and then he kind of goes through the rest of the book about talking what these two approaches to food did to the food environment and to the diets of people in both of these countries. And this is, again, the book is really fascinating because he looks at, because of the way we fix the problem in the United States, it created a mentality that food was the problem. Like our food was not healthy enough, it was not complete enough, and so we needed to fix it. We needed to fix the food for everybody. And it created kind of a negative relationship we had with food of like, food's a problem, food's not sufficient. We have to add things to food to make it more sufficient. Whereas Italy changed the way people ate and what they consumed, and encouraged them to consume more of other real foods instead of enriching and fortifying the foods they already had. They still fixed the problem. It took years longer, but they still fixed the problem. And now today we have these massive environments, different environments of obesity and food environments in both countries today. And one of the fascinating things in this book is he looks at several studies, and one of the studies he looks at is in the 1940s, when I think it was at the University of Illinois, they were trying to find, and so he talks a lot, and many of these books talks a lot about how so much of our diet in the US and in the West is now a corn-based diet. And this is both very interesting and very challenging. And this is one of the reasons why I'm using the word decolonizing health. Because corn was cultivated first in the Americas by Native Americans hundreds, maybe even thousands of years ago. And we've been eating a corn-based diet. It's been a very big staple of our diet for hundreds of years. And we've never had Filagro before. And as he examines what it is about a corn-based diet, and so corn is a very, very useful food. It's nutrient dense. It for a single kernel of corn that you plant, you get a ton of calories from it. A lot of food is grown from a single corn. It can adapt and be grown in many different types of environments. And we started cultivating it as Native peoples hundreds, even thousands of years ago. And I forget if it's in his book or other books, but other people point out that in evolutionary terms, corn has been massively successful by essentially throwing itself in with the fate of humans. One of the books I read said that corn is entirely dependent upon being cultivated and planted by people with opposable thumbs. If you throw a cob of corn into the ground and cover it up, most likely it won't grow because the seeds won't be able to grow through the husk and germinate through the husk. And even if they do, they're so densely packed, they will literally starve each other out and they won't be able to grow. And again, Native peoples, we were the first to cultivate corn, especially down in South America, as I think where it was first cultivated a long time ago. It has spread throughout most of Southern and North America, was here long before Columbus got lost at sea. It's been a staple part of our diet for hundreds of years, if not longer. And we've grown it. Most native communities grow corn in the style of what we call the Three Sisters, where you have corn, you have beans, and you have squash that you grow together. And the corn sprouts up. It provides kind of a stalk and a trellis almost for the beans to grow on and around. And then the squash grows and it provides some cover for the roots and it keeps moisture in the ground. And most Native communities grow the three sisters together: corn, beans, and squash. The beans provide nutrients into the ground that keeps the soil more fertile and healthy. And we've been growing corn this way again for hundreds and hundreds of years. And many of our food supplies were destroyed by our colonizers, Europeans and the Americans. Like the buffalo, they literally hunted them, not even hunted, just slaughtered them to almost extinction. In part because it was one of our staple food supplies throughout much of North America. They didn't do that to corn. We taught them how to grow corn, and they started planting them, but they didn't follow our lead. They didn't grow them with the beans and the squash. They planted them as a single crop on fields, and after 2 or 3 seasons, when the corn would basically suck all the nutrients out of the ground, they would just move on to other, and so the soil wouldn't even regenerate very well. The way we were growing them, it regenerated much more quickly and it was much healthier. And yeah, anyway, I won't go into all of that. But our colonizers did take corn from us. We taught them how to grow it. They didn't grow it the way we taught them. They grew it as a single crop, as a single field crop. They planted only corn and nothing else. And then they would just, when the soil got depleted, they would just move on to another field. They would just go on and kind of decimate the land as they spread further and further west. And again, the challenge with a corn-based diet is corn is not a complete food. It doesn't, as people, we're omnivores. We need multiple types of food from many different sources to get all the nutrients and micronutrients and everything else that we need to survive. And corn can provide a lot of calories, but it doesn't provide everything. And corn has niacin in it, but the niacin in the corn is not accessible to the body unless you prepare it in a way called nixtamalization, which is you cook it with something acidic, which actually makes the niacin in the corn accessible to the body. And if you prepare it that way, you will not get sick with filagra. Now, down in South America, many of the tribes for hundreds of years have been preparing their corn and their corn tortillas with lime. And the lime provides the acidity that's needed for nixtamalization, which makes the niacin accessible to the body. My people, my Navajo people, we have something called blue corn mush. It's made from a blue corn. I've known that the recipe, for most of my life, I've known this. The recipe for blue corn mush includes using juniper ash or tree ash in the recipe. As I was researching, both reading this book and researching other sources, I learned that the juniper ash and the ash provides the acidity in the corn needs so the niacin becomes accessible to the body, which is the reason my people, now people, didn't have filagra, even though corn was a very staple and even a large part of our diet pre-colonization. Now, we didn't know the science. We didn't know it was the micronutrient niacin we were missing, and that preparing it with ash or with limes or something else acidic would provide what we need. All we knew is that when we cooked things this way, prepared them this way, we didn't get sick. And so we've been preparing this using not science, but indigenous wisdom, and that has been passed down from generations of this is how you prepare your corn. This is how you grow your corn. This is how you prepare your corn. This is how you eat your corn. The Americans didn't listen to us. Again, we were savages. We weren't human. They didn't think they had much to learn from us at all. And so they planted it as a single crop. They decimated their fields. They made corn a staple majority part of their diet. And they started dying from it because they didn't bother to ask us, how do you cook this? And for most Native peoples, corn is something sacred. It's sacred. As Navajo people, we pray with our corn pollen. Corn is treated as something powerful, as something sacred. Americans turned into a commodity. You can't even sell corn today for what it costs to grow it. That's why it's subsidized by the government. It's a commodity that is in virtually everything we eat. Not everything, most things that we eat. Corn has lost any sense of being sacred in this country. And in the late 1800s or 1900s, it was killing thousands of people a year. And as Western science was learning about micronutrients, they said, oh, well, we just need to add in the nutrients that the food doesn't have. The food's incomplete. We have to make it better. We'll improve it. And then we'll fix it. Food's the problem, was the mentality that they had. And this radically changed the food environment, where today, and Mark points this out in the book, The End of Craving, today, so many of our processed foods are fortified, not just with niacin and riboflavin, which is what we put in our flour and in our white rice and our white pasta, but breakfast cereals, processed foods are fortified with vitamins and micronutrients and minerals. We put it in everything. And one of the points Mark makes in the book, The End of Craving, is our bodies have used our senses, our tongues, our taste, to begin the process of digestion and using the nutrients in foods for thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of years. So when we taste something sweet, our bodies begin producing insulin so that it can process the fructose or the sucrose that's coming in, the glucose that's going to enter into our bodies. We've been using our taste for hundreds, thousands, millions of years. We've adjusted to these things. We've adapted to these things. We know these things. Our bodies know these things, know how to, when we taste something sweet, when we taste something a certain way, when we taste a certain type of food, we know what's in it, and our bodies are prepared to use those nutrients. But today, and he points out the absurdity of, you can get 25% of your almost daily vitamins and minerals from eating a bowl of sugary flour and corn in like a Fruity Pebbles cereal. You get many of your vitamins and nutrients that you need for the day without eating a single fruit or vegetable or anything that's whole food. And he goes into some studies, and I don't have time to go through all of this, but he goes into some studies in this book. And he looks at some of what happens to the mind when you're dealing with addiction. And he's talking specifically, one of the addictions he looks at more closely is the addiction to gambling. And he talks about one study where they had did the mice or rats, and they gave them a lever. And when they touched, there were 3 different cages. One cage, when the rat touched the lever, they always got food. The second was when they touched the lever, they never got food. And the third, when they touched the lever, sometimes they got food and sometimes they didn't. Worked out to about an average of 50%, but it was inconsistent. And the question was, which rat's going to hit the lever the most? The assumption was it would be the rat who, every time they hit the lever, they get food. But in the tests they ran, that rat hit the lever almost as much as the rat who didn't get food when they hit the lever, primarily because the lever was boring. So they didn't hit it very frequently. The rat who hit the lever the most frequently was the rat who got food inconsistently. That's what was most intriguing. That's what captivated their attention and kept them coming back to hit the lever again, because they didn't know what was going to happen. And he takes some of the principles, and I'm just describing one study, but he takes a lot of studies like this and applies it to when our bodies, and especially if we take things like sweet and low or sucralose or other things that we put to sweeten our foods, we can taste something that tastes like, you can drink a soda that has about 120 to 150 calories in a 12-ounce can of soda, and it tastes just as sweet as a soda made with full sugar, but it has no sugar in it whatsoever. It has no calories in it. And so when your mouth tastes the soda, it's like prepared to consume 120 to 150 worth of calories coming down the throat, and it never gets it. And it creates a level of uncertainty within the body, where the body tastes food that should be delivering these nutrients and these calories, but it doesn't get them, or it gets them inconsistently. And so the body, that over tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of years has gotten adjusted and used to certain foods and certain tastes and certain flavors, providing certain amounts of nutrients, now no longer knows what it's getting. And he talks about how this leads to messing up what we crave. Right? Another disease like pellagra is called scurvy. And if you have scurvy, which is a lack of vitamin C, which is also deadly and very, very, very painful. And if you have a lack of vitamin C, an orange will look amazing to you and will taste even better. It will taste amazing. Why? Because your body knows what it is and it wants, needs, is crying out for those nutrients. Our bodies, and he makes this point several times throughout the book, they're not machines. Our bodies are not just components and machines that need fuel. Our bodies are living, breathing organisms that have been designed or evolved, however you want to look at your history, over hundreds of thousands, millions of years. And it has gotten incredibly good at keeping us alive in the midst of incredible food insecurity. Our bodies are literally, they're not machines, they're living organisms that work very, very, very hard to keep us alive in an environment of massive and incredible food insecurity. Now, yes, today, especially in the United States, many of us do not have great food insecurity. We're living in one of the few times in history where for many, many, many people, food insecurity is not a problem. For many it is. I don't want to discount that, but for many Americans and other people in cultures and countries and cities throughout the world, we're dealing with an abundance of calories. And we have multiple choices a day of what we want and can choose to eat. Many of us are not living in places of food insecurity, but this is a rare point in history. For much of evolutionary history, we've had to survive through periods of incredible and vast food insecurity, and our bodies are living, breathing organisms that have gotten very good at keeping us alive during those times. And food is not simply fuel. It's not just a gas that you just put in and everybody needs the exact same thing. And there you put it in and there you go and off. No, depending on where you live and what you're eating and your food context and your movement context and all that, your body has different needs and different desires and different cravings. And so we crave what we need. We get hungry for things that our body is lacking or is in need of. Right? If you haven't had a lot of niacin recently, you'll probably crave some beans because your body knows beans are in niacin are in beans, or you'll crave some meat, or you'll crave something made with yeast. You'll crave a tamale or some blue corn mush because you'll know there'll be some accessible niacin within that. And this is what I found most fascinating about this book, because while so many other books are about avoiding and limiting even real whole foods, and I'm going to paraphrase what the book says. What I've taken from this book and what I've been working very hard to apply into my own life is when I eat less processed foods or no processed foods, and when I do my best to avoid enriched and fortified foods, and I get my vitamins and my nutrients and my micronutrients from real whole foods, I can begin to trust the cravings that I have more. I'm not craving double Whoppers and Kentucky Fried Chicken. I'm craving things like beans and squash and leafy greens and dairy or cheeses or certain types of meat or peanuts or carrots, spinach. I've been working hard for the past probably 5 or 6 months to really reduce the enriched and fortified foods that I've been eating. And it took a while, right? Most breads that you buy in the store by law will come enriched. Most rices and flours and pastas that you buy in the store will come enriched. Almost anything processed that you eat, breakfast cereals or pre-prepared foods, will come enriched with vitamins and micronutrients and other things like that. And when I avoid those foods and work hard to eat a more complete diet based on whole foods, I'm finding that my body is craving different things, and I'm slowly learning to begin to trust those cravings and then to eat more of that type of food. It's been a fascinating journey. And this is how I imagine Indigenous peoples have lived much of our existence, is hunting and gathering the foods that we were craving and then eating them. One of the things Mark Schatzker points out in his book is the challenge, even if you read some of the other books, that the book by Michael Pollan about that I talked about earlier regarding what was the name of that book? Let me find it real quick. This one, In Defense of Food, where he talks about eating whole, real foods, mostly fruits and vegetables. And yeah. And what I find interesting about that is it still talks about avoiding foods, and especially avoiding things like fats and creams and things and foods like that. And what I've been both reading and experimenting with is, right, for much of human existence, fat is one of the most calorie dense foods you can eat. And it was something that our bodies needed. And so we did not evolve by cutting the fat off of our meat and eating only the leanest cuts of meat. I would imagine people fought for the fattest cuts of meat, the most marbled cuts of meat. Because not only did that taste the best, but it provided more of the nutrients that people living in a food insecure environment, their bodies were probably craving and hungry for. And so what I'm finding and what I've been experimenting with is even allowing myself to eat whole foods that are more fatty, that, not buying low fat milk, but buying regular milk, not buying low fat yogurt, but buying full fat yogurt. And because a lot of times when you look at the things that are low fat or non-fat, they replace the fat with something sweet to make up for the flavor loss. And so again, to eat the least amount of processed foods I can, I just try to buy what's made with more real whole foods and then enjoy those foods. And so anyway, so yeah, this book has been a fascinating journey. I just read it for a second time, and I'm finding it is really challenging me to think differently about our food environment and to not jump on the bandwagon of demonizing food, at least not demonizing whole real food, whether it's a cut of meat, a slice of cheese, or something grown in a garden or on a farm. Doing the best I can to eating the least amount of processed foods that I can. And I've said this before, I'll say it again, right? I've lost over 55 pounds. I eat an ice cream cone almost every night. When I first started giving up processed foods, I had to hunt and gather to find ice cream that wasn't processed. If you look at the ingredients on your average container of ice cream, we'll have many, many, many processed ingredients with gums and other things and other sweeteners and things to hold it together. And there's probably 20 to 30 things on the ingredient list of most ice creams. The ice cream I eat has 4 ingredients: cream, milk, sugar, and either vanilla beans for vanilla ice cream or cocoa beans for chocolate ice cream. 4 ingredients in my ice cream. And I usually eat a scoop to a scoop and a half of ice cream every evening. And in the process, I've still lost 55 pounds. That's generally usually the only sugar I eat during the day. I no longer add sugar to my coffee. I do add cream to my second cup of coffee, not my first cup of coffee. So I do have cream in here. But so this book has allowed me, and again, if I go back to what I said earlier, I talked about this earlier in one of my first cups of coffee. The book is challenging me to understand my body's not a machine and food is not fuel. My body is a living, breathing organism, and food is not only what nourishes it, but it's what my body craves, and it's even what brings my body enjoyment and pleasure. And so when I eat food, and Mark talks about a lot of the difference in the eating environment between Italy and the US, where we changed our food and processed our food and added to our food, and Italy didn't do that. And today we have an obesity epidemic and Italy doesn't. We have a fast food environment and Italy doesn't have that nearly as much. We cook things with massively processed ingredients and Italy by and large doesn't. We eat our food and our meals in a much quicker, shorter time than most Italians eat their foods and their meals. And food and meals are meant to be enjoyed, savored, eaten communally, not slurped down behind the wheel of a car while you're going to your next meeting. And so this book has really been challenging me to not only eat quality, good, flavorful, real whole foods, but to savor them, to enjoy them, to share them in a communal setting with my family or with people who visit us. And as I've been doing this now for 4 or 5 months, I'm finding it's slowly beginning to change the food environment within our home and within our house. Now, for much of this year, I reached about the 50 pound of weight loss, maybe earlier in this year. And I got to a weight, when I started 2 years ago, I weighed 215 pounds. I got down to 165 pounds earlier this year. And I've been hovering now for the past 4 or 5 months, or actually for the past 2 or 3 months, at around 160. Some weeks I weigh about 158, 159. Other weeks I'll weigh 161, 162. But I've been hovering right around 160 for the past 2 or 3 months. And I'm actually in a point where I'm no longer trying to lose weight. I'm trying to maintain my weight while continuing to exercise and to move and to eat healthy. And I'm finding that as I'm trying to maintain my weight now, I actually at times need to eat more calories instead of less, and to allow myself to have a bit more cream in my coffee instead of less, to allow myself to have a bit more of the gravy or the meat I'm eating, or whatever else that we're having, instead of less. And it's, yeah, I'm finding this is, and this isn't happening overnight. It's happening slowly, but I'm slowly changing my food and our family's food environment to the point where food is becoming something that requires time to both shop for, cook, and to eat. And I'm finding the more thoughtfulness and intentionality and time we put into buying, cooking, and eating the food, the more enjoyment, satisfaction, and pleasure, not just me, but our family, is getting from these foods. And so I highly recommend the book, The End of Craving. I encourage you to read it. It makes some very interesting claims and challenges, and it's one of the most useful books I've read over the past 2 years, and has done a lot to help me not just change, to cut something out or add something into my diet, but it's really helped to change my relationship with and the context of the food environment for our family, to the point where, for the first time in years, maybe even decades, I would say I'm beginning now to trust what I'm craving and enjoying the foods that my body's craving. The other day, I ate a stick of celery dipped in some real peanut butter. I've never enjoyed that before in my life. And these past few months, I've begun to enjoy that. I'll eat carrot sticks with carrots bought from the farmer's market, dipped in some hummus. I've never liked hummus, but my body's beginning to crave and enjoy these types of foods. I will. There are different times I'll crave beans. I'll crave different fruits and vegetables. We've eaten more random fruits and vegetables in our family, in our house, in the past 5 months than we've ever eaten in our entire, since my wife and I have been married. And it's been a really fun and pleasurable experience where food is becoming, our relationship with food is changing. It didn't happen overnight, and it didn't happen only because of the book, The End of Craving. And I've even gone beyond some of what The End of Craving is advocating for. But that book has been, I would say, a very important step in the journey I've been on to not just be healthier, right? One of the things I've been wrestling with, and I'll talk about this more in a second cup of coffee in the future, but one of the things I'm trying to do, now that I'm no longer trying to lose weight, and I'm not trying to improve my times and increase my distance, I'm just trying to be healthy. I'm trying to maintain my health. I just want to, I'm getting older. I'm 54. I want to grow some muscle and to continue to strengthen my body, because as you get older, you need to continue to work on improving your strength. I'm working on that, but I'm not training for a race. I'm not trying to get to a certain weight. I'm trying to just maintain my health right now. And I realize I got to this level. I got to this point by tracking my calories, by counting my steps, by tracking my sleep. And that has been very, very, very helpful in this journey. But I don't want to count my calories, track my sleep, and count every step for the rest of my life. I did those things to be healthy, to get healthy, but I want to begin to trust my body without my watch beeping every hour that I have to move enough to get 250 steps an hour in. I don't want to have to check my watch every night. Did I get over 12,000 steps today, which is the standard I have on my phone or on my watch? I don't want to sit down and mentally count the calories of every meal I eat to think, did I go too far, too little? What do I need to do? The goal of all of this is to have my body be back in touch with my environment and to know I live a lifestyle and I have an environment where I can just enjoy being healthy. And that's the next stage, is I want to begin to track less and just enjoy the health that I have more. And part of that is going to require changing my body and my mind's relationship with the foods we eat, and allowing myself to learn to trust my body and the foods it's craving, and to know that when I work hard to give it good whole foods, I can trust what my body's telling me when it says it needs something. So that's the whole next part of the journey, and I'll let you in on that as I continue to explore it. But my relatives, I appreciate all of you. I'm going to look at the comments here. I haven't looked at the comments, so I've just been kind of talking for the past several I don't know how long, but yeah, I appreciate all of you. Thank you for joining me today. I hope your cup of coffee, our mid-afternoon beverage, is as good as mine is. I appreciate all of you, my relatives. Hope you have a great weekend. This weekend is actually my wife and my anniversary, our wedding anniversary. So we're going to take some time to celebrate this weekend. Also, our daughter graduated high school this week, and so we had a celebration for her. So a lot of things going on in our family right now. Really looking forward to the summer as we get into the summer months now. It's been a beautiful spring here in Washington, D.C. Oh, I do want to give you a little bit of update on some of the stuff I'm doing. My Common Memory Tour is getting into more of a full summer swing. If you want to learn about my Common Memory Tour, I'm going to put a post in here to the GoFundMe where you can both read about my tour as well as support it if you would like to do that. But over the next 2 months, I have a few trips planned. In June, end of the month, in June 28th, I'm going to be in Gallup, New Mexico, speaking at the New Mexico Social Justice and Equity Institute in Gallup, New Mexico. It's on the Saturday the 28th at 6 p.m. Mountain Time. I don't have a location yet. But I'm also in the process of, because I'm going to be out there, I'm actually going to visit my family for several days. And so I would love to schedule another event while I'm in New Mexico around that time. I fly in on June 25th and I fly out at the end of the month. And so if you know somewhere in New Mexico that would like to host one of my Common Memory of tour events, please reach out to me. I would love to try and get 1 or 2 more events scheduled while I'm going to be there for almost a week. And then in July, I just scheduled an event near Chattanooga, Tennessee. And on July 13th, which is a Sunday, I'm going to be at the Woodland Gathering in Soddy Daisy, Tennessee, which is just outside of Chattanooga, giving my Christian nationalism, creation stories, and corn talk there. And I'm actually hoping to turn that, I'm going to be driving down there. I'm hoping to turn that trip into a longer tour event. If you remember when I did my Unsettling Truths book tour several years ago, I was gone for 6 weeks during the summer. I'm not going to be traveling for 6 weeks, but I would love to travel for about a week and a half or 2 weeks and drive down to Tennessee, doing several events, maybe in Virginia, North Carolina, even Georgia along the way, and then coming back and doing some other events, maybe in Kentucky, elsewhere in Tennessee, and a few other places as I come back to DC. And so if you would like to work with me to schedule an event for my Common Memory tour for this summer, please reach out to me. And if you want to learn more about it, go to my Common Memory Tour GoFundMe page. I put the link in there above. And if you want to follow me on Patreon, which is where you can go deeper into my conversation, get more of my content, this is one of the best ways that helps keep my voice as independent as possible. I encourage you to subscribe to me on Patreon. You can even subscribe to me for free. I post several public posts there a week as well. Or you can subscribe to one of my subscription tiers and get more in-depth content from there. And then, of course, I'm continuing to sell my book, Unsettling Truths. And if you'd like to buy a copy of Unsettling Truths, either a single copy or a book study special, which comes with 10 copies and a free virtual Q&A for your book study, you can get that all from my website. My relatives, I appreciate all of you. I hope you have a great weekend. Thank you for joining me. I hope you found these things helpful. This is going to be something I'm going to continue talking about more and more, but my relatives walk in beauty. And may we all learn how to walk in beauty together. Go on it.